we've got it set up 7:30. All right, 7:31. Sorry, guys, a little bit late. So we are here today. I'm getting this set up. All right, we're here today to go over my post QHHT session with Dr. Scott from Matrix Hypnosis. So what I wanted to do is bring him on, let him introduce himself a little bit, and talk about kind of his journey, how he got to QHHT. Then we're going to go over kind of my pregame for my very first QHHT session, since I've never done one before. I'm an overthinker, so I did a lot of research, tried to prepare for what I was going to do, and try to optimize that. And so without further ado, you guys, let's go ahead and bring on Dr. Scott. And
hello,
Dr. Scott, are you here? Hi. Okay, so now we're live. And I'm yelling again, guys. I'm sorry. I don't have headphones in, so I can't actually tell the tone of my voice right now. So, all right, Dr. Scott, if you want to do us all a wonderful favor and kind of tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got here.
All right. I'm Dr. Scott, Matrix Hypnosis. Gosh, where to begin? When I first heard about quantum healing hypnosis technique, I wasn't really thinking about doing past life regressions as a full-time occupation. In fact, my story goes back much earlier than that. I'd say probably about 2015, 2016. I just happened to pick up a book. And the book was called Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. I love reading. And this book was very dense. And in this book, I learned a ton. I highly recommend the book to any of your followers. It's probably right up most of their alleys if they're anything like me and into metaphysics. But what I walked away with from the book, and what is explicitly stated in the book, is that...
One second, Doc. One second, Doc.
Go ahead.
My setup, apparently I've messed something up because you're getting a bad echo, and it seems to only be on my side. Oddly, interesting enough, they said it actually sounds like you're in the Matrix, so that's fun. So guys, like I said, new software. I apologize for that. Let me go ahead and see how I can fix that. Give me 1 second, all right?
Am I still echoing? Do we need a black cat to cross the screen, like in the Matrix?
All right. See if that fixed it. Sorry, guys. That is my fault. I'm still trying to figure out the stuff for this, but go ahead, Doc, if you want to go ahead and talk and see if we can get you going.
Okay. I do have a black cat, by the way, who might appear, and he might just walk across the screen, just like in the Matrix. So, you know.
Good. I think we should be good. I'm seeing no echoes, right, guys? That was my fault. I overdid it with the sound. I gave you two sounds because I didn't know where it was going to come from. All right. So we should be go ahead. Sorry about that. Let's try that again. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit again, non-matrixy, if that's technically possible, since it all might be a simulation anyway. But go ahead, Doc.
Sure. Okay, so the book that I picked up happened to be The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. Highly recommend it. Okay, it's a 600-page book. It's very dense. It's one of those things you got to read slowly over a long period of time, but it would probably relate to much of what your audience is fascinated with. And the thing I walked away with that set me on this path, and what is explicitly stated in the foreword of the book, is that the book was sort of written as a FU to the world's elites, because the elites teach their kids a completely different set of histories than are taught to everybody else. And I thought, wait a minute. I'm somebody, I have kids, and I wonder what they're teaching their kids that mine aren't learning. And the book went ahead and explained that. But that sort of set me on this metaphysical pathway. And so I picked up the next book, and then I picked up the next book. And then COVID struck, right? And so everyone is sitting at home, me, much to my chagrin. And I'm very much into this metaphysics stuff by this point. I'm reading Rudolf Steiner, I'm reading Dolores Cannon, just very fascinated by it all. And I saw an interview with Dolores Cannon on George Norrie. And then I looked up every interview I could from Dolores Cannon shortly after that. And then I thought to myself, you know, a past life hypnotic regression is not something you can like buy at Walmart. Like it's unique, like a fingerprint. It's something that I wish I could press a button and have all the knowledge I once had right now. Right. I wish, you know, in a way, I sort of feel like it's mine. I educated myself on it at one point in my life, and then I get into this life, and now I'm, you know, maybe I don't know. Maybe I used to be able to build rocket ships. You know, I have no idea. But how cool would it be? I thought to be able to access all that past life information and have it now in the present, and just that whole thought of, you know, recovering lost knowledge stuck with me. And so I decided to begin my QHHT internship. And so I did. And that led me down this path to here, to you all today. And I haven't looked back since. And it's been such an incredible journey. I feel blessed to even be able to be here with you to talk about it. So
I will say that Dolores Cannon was we'll say a gateway drug to consciousness, I guess, for me too. My consciousness journey started actually more on the Monroe Institute side with their hemisync technology, because I really came in from a very scientific standpoint, trying to disprove or prove God or something. Like, I don't know what exactly I was trying to set out, but I wanted to find some kind of evidence of that. And then that led me to the Bob Monroe's book series, which then obviously the algorithm, whether we call it this one or the algorithm of Amazon, started suggesting Dolores Cannon, and so did my Facebook. So did just kind of wherever I was at, I was seeing these connections. I ended up getting, I believe, the Convoluted Universe 1. And I wasn't consciously participating. Yeah, but I wasn't consciously participating in it because we had it on Audible. We typically listen at about 1.75 speed, and it's not to really learn, it's more to just kind of experience it. So I didn't really connect with it, but what I did end up connecting with is the YouTube videos really got me. Like, I went down rabbit holes with that one. And then it led me to the Facebook page, which ended up leading me to Laura Starr. And then my whole universe of this QHHT just exploded. Like, it is. And I use that word intentionally, that universe of it, because it is a whole like microverse of spiritualism, and they're all interwoven and connected. And to tell everybody at home kind of how I met Dr. Scott is, again, I just mentioned that, you know, I met Laura Starr, and my page, while it's not something like massive, most of the people here that follow my page came from Laura Starr or one of the Dolores Cannon groups, because me and Laura have done a couple interviews, and she's a really good friend of me and my wife's, and you know, we talk to her pretty regularly. So she shared some stuff. So a lot of you guys are already either QHH2 practitioners yourself, or you at least have some kind of connection to Dolores Cannon. And I had told my wife, I was like, one of these days, I want to be hypnotized, because I've never been hypnotized. She can be hypnotized relatively easy under the right conditions. I've never been hypnotized, and it's something I've really been fascinated for. And I said, you know what? The first time that I'm going to be hypnotized, I think that it should be a QHHT practitioner, just because of my consciousness exploration, and something I'll talk about another time. My conscious pathway has been very interwoven in these Monroe Institute QHHT fields. And I thought it would only be fitting that if the first time I'm going to be hypnotized, it needs to be a QHHT practitioner. And we looked around and couldn't find one. We had found maybe, I think, one online, and we never got a return email or something like that. And so it was about, I'd say maybe a year later. It's been about a year since I first looked. And then Dr. Scott sent me a message and had mentioned, you know, I'd rather you tell, I guess, kind of how you found me and where we went from there.
Sure. And for those wondering, if you go to qhhtofficial.com and hit the Find a Practitioner button, that's how you can see if there's someone in your area. And so I know one of the questions that we got was, you know, hey, how do I know if someone's legit? Well, if they're on that Find a Practitioner button, they're a official QHHT practitioner. That being said,
and why is local? Because I understand, again, I'm not a practitioner myself, but one thing I have heard a lot of is that you have to do it locally, not online. Like online sessions aren't really at least recommended, I believe.
Correct. Correct. And we can get into that now, or we can get into that later if you want to.
Okay, let's get in that later. But just a note to everybody: there is a specific reason why I didn't just go online and just find one of hundreds of you guys that I interact with. It is instrumental that I guess you do it in person. So that's when Dr. Scott arrived for me.
Yeah. Okay. So, in case any of you guys are wondering, yes, I did reach out to JD and we did book a session with him. Reason being, it was sort of, I don't know, serendipitous coincidence, though I don't really believe in coincidence anymore.
Right.
Or don't have the luxury of believing in coincidence, perhaps I should say.
Right.
Uh, I still work a full-time job at a Fortune 500 company. And, I got some bad news this particular day. And I was kind of down about it, right? It's one of those things where, you work a job and you've been there for, in my case, 15 years. And, the news about, okay, well, what's next? Am I going to move up? Am I going to move out? Like it wasn't a really good conversation. And so I was kind of bummed about it. And I was trying not to let the energy of that affect me and affect the evening, because I don't like it when outside forces, I feel like try and ruin my vibe, ruin my energy. And so I was just kind of thinking about it. I was kind of wrestling with this negative potential, and I was looking for a way to make lemonade out of lemons. And so my wife, she said, hey, why don't you reach out to this guy, JD, see if he's interested in a session. I think he's local. And so I did. And so long story short, we did. And wow, he had such an incredible session. And that's how I'm talking here with you guys today. We really did turn lemons into lemonade.
It was an interesting drink, is what that was. And so just to kind of where we end up going from there, and I'll let Dr. Scott talk a little bit more about kind of what that, lack of a better word, because I'm a systems person, that onboarding kind of looks like roughly. Before I let him kind of elaborate, for those of you guys who haven't had a QHHT experience, a lot of those questions that we'll cover towards, at the end of all of this and answer questions that people have. But a lot of the concerns that I saw in those questions that people have who haven't been hypnotized or haven't had a session, and I believe one or two cases, somebody who had a session that, for lack of a better phrase, didn't really meet their expectations. I had every single one of those concerns. I was actually telling Dr. Scott before we even got on here, when he reached out to me, I was like, there's so much unknown, and I don't know if misinformation is the right word, but there's a lack of understanding of what this is. And it seems like such an abstract concept. And a lot of things in the spiritual space obviously are very kind of conceptual, abstract. But hypnosis actually isn't that abstract. I found, at least after my session with you. But coming into it, I literally thought, well, what if I can't be hypnotized? Or worse yet for me is I can't be hypnotized, because I'm saying that I'm not able to do that because I never have been. So I started off like, I can't be hypnotized. And then I switched around and it's like, no, I'm sure I can. I just don't know what that means and what that looks like. And then you get into the internet of what is hypnosis? Are they going to make me like bark like a dog? Or in my wife's case, regress back to her childhood. And if you don't mind me sharing, she had a speech impediment when she was a kid. And so she replicated that speech impediment. So there's this range of misunderstanding. And I had all of those questions. So I did my research and I did some things to prep. But before I go over kind of what I did to prep, Dr. Scott, if you want to talk about, I guess, what in your experience are the most common misconceptions that you experience and that you see with QHHT?
We hit the nail on the head. First of all, when it comes to expectations, my humble recommendation is to have none. Don't come in with any expectations to a QHHT session at all. Ultimately, the reason is very logical. It's because you're not really in charge of it, nor is your practitioner. It's your subconscious, your oversoul, your higher self, whatever you want to call it. They're the ones that are in charge. And so, in a way, it's very freeing. You don't have to come up with requirements and hurdles to jump, because they don't matter anyway. So that's the first thing.
Right.
And JD, I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Oh, just more of like, what are the most common misconceptions that you've experienced in general?
Right.
And I'll say, and I was going to say one of the things, just to kind of piggyback on what you said right there about that expectations. And clearly on my page, I love the science of quantum physics and consciousness, and it translates really well to spiritualism in the fact that whether you call it manifestation, it's all about what you believe you receive, and it sounds kind of floofy, but that's actually very accurate of a description of whatever you set as that expectation. And I always say that the universe doesn't hear you do or don't want, it just hears the object. So if you're saying that I don't want this, all it hears is yada 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 this, and it kind of doubles down on it. So with those expectations, I agree 100%. The second I came in and I talked to you and you said that to me, you said, look, just don't have any expectations. Don't even assume that you might even know what that might be like, because, and to get in what you're saying, it wasn't me, but it was. And that's a whole different thing. But yeah, expectations as my tip, like just leave them out the door and just let it flow.
100%. Very well said. Couldn't have said it better myself. When it comes to the questions about like, can I be hypnotized? How do I know if I'm under? There's a couple variables at play there. Is this a good time to get into that?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
Okay. So there's four major brainwave states, and QHHT works in one of the four. Okay. And the reason why this is important, because I'm going to build on it later. The question is, how do I know I'm hypnotized? Well, you hypnotize yourself twice a day, regardless, anyway, whether you're aware of it or not, a minimum of twice a day. You probably hypnotize yourself much more than that. And again, don't even really know it. You hypnotize yourself every day as you're falling to sleep, and you hit that spot of rest where you're not quite asleep, but you're not quite awake. This is the state that we QHHT practitioners work in. It's called, well, I'll get into that in just a second. But you get into this state of mind at minimum twice a day. Even if you're driving on the highway. I mean, if you look at the Missouri driver's manual, we're in Missouri, they have a section called highway hypnosis. And they're warning you about it, right? Anytime you close your eyes and just kind of focus for a second, that's a form of hypnosis. That's not the one we work in, but that's a form of hypnosis. So this is important because you realize later on that you are hypnotizing yourself multiple times a day anyway. You're in and out of various trance states all the time. So the four brainwave states that are important here, first of all, is beta. The beta brainwave state is the one that I'm talking to JD and all the rest of you right now. This is your waking mind, your conscious, everyday, go to work, get groceries, go to sleep type of mind. That's what we're doing now. That's not the state that we work in. Alpha is another brainwave state. If you're in alpha, you've kind of got your eyes closed and you're trying to focus. Maybe you're starting to meditate or something like that, or you're trying to remember where you put your car keys and you just kind of sink into yourself for a second. That's alpha. In this brainwave state, this is what clinical psychologists use most of the time. This is the stop smoking, lose weight type of hypnosis. This is where if you go for conventional hypnosis through a regular psychotherapist and they do hypnosis, they're going to put you in alpha to help you stop smoking, lose weight, whatever. That's not the state we work in either. Deeper than that is what's called the theta state. And that's the state we QHHT practitioners work in. This is the state of mind you hit just that second before you fall asleep, where you're not quite down in delta, and delta is the next brainwave state. That's when you're asleep. But coming back up, just gliding above delta a little bit, is theta. That's the sweet spot that we're trying to hit. So that's the state, JD, that I had you in when you came to see me.
That's the hypnagogic state, correct? Is that
another word for it?
Hypnagogic state. Yeah.
Yes, and the theta brainwave state. The question is, how do you know if you're under? Well, okay, a couple things at play here. First of all, trust your practitioner. Your practitioner knows if you're under. I knew when JD was under. JD probably knew it on some level, if not consciously, unconsciously, he certainly knew it. But trust your practitioner first of all, because if you feel like you're not under, chances are you might be under and you just don't understand it. It is very common nowadays in this era of spiritual awakening, and there's a lot of reasons why we're having a spiritual awakening right now. It's very common for people to start recalling every bit about their sessions, and it leads them to question, okay, well, if I can remember everything, was I really under? Those of us that are more spiritually tuned might recall more of it. Okay. However, in years past, in decades past, when Dolores Cannon was doing this was almost like anesthetic. Like you were out, you don't remember anything, you come out of it, and then you're like, okay, gosh, I hope I was under. Well, good thing you have a tape to prove what happened while you're under hypnosis, right? And so in this day and age, it's a lot more commonplace for people to have more vivid recollections of being conscious while being hypnotized. And that is okay. That is a good sign for humanity. That is what we want. We want a general spiritual awakening. So I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, and for me, that was a question that I had. I'm like, how will I know when I'm hypnotized? And going back to my initial entry into this, again, being through the Monroe Institute with their HemiSync audio, I did some like deep diving research into like what are the physical states that you have in the hypnagogic state, and I found that, oddly enough, it's different for everybody. There's a different state because it's more of a spectrum. And while these brain waves or states are great to kind of chunk, it's all sound, it's all vibration, and so it's really more of a spectrum. And you're just trying to understand these states. My biggest kind of going into a prep, how I kind of prepped before I came to you, and then we can get into maybe a little bit about like kind of the pregame that we had lightly kind of, and why that was necessary, unless it wasn't supposed to be like that and I just rambled for too long. We can cover that then too. But yeah, so what I did before I came to you, because again, I had these doubts and I wanted to not just dwell on them. I wanted to address them. I wanted to solve that problem so I didn't have those roadblocks, because I wanted to get the most out of the session. And what I noticed is anybody who thinks that they're going to have these issues, that's such a great sign, because now you have awareness, right? You have conscious awareness of something that may be it may be an obstacle for you. So now you have time to solve that before you even go in and drop those things. Going back to what we said earlier, for me, the biggest thing was really letting go of all expectation. And I mean, literally all of them. Like I acted like I've never even heard of the word hypnosis. Like in my head, I was like, I wonder what a hypnosis is. Like whatever I could do to get myself to forget what I knew already or what I thought I knew, because realistically, you don't know what something is until you've actually experienced it. So first I had to kind of like trick my brain into forgetting that we knew what it is. It was a lot of imagination on my part. I actively use my imagination regularly, and I role play through life. Like me and my wife, we gamify life. We have a gamification system that we have our own little point system for. And so I'm gamifying being in character of somebody who's never, ever had hypnosis before, because I haven't. And I've never even heard of it. So that was my first thing. The second thing I did is I already meditate a lot. More than once a day, like typically on average 2 to 3 times a day throughout the day, because that's the only break that we get in our entrepreneurship life. And so doing that is getting familiar with emptying your mind, because that's really what you're doing when we say let go of expectations. It's don't think anything. And when I say that, that's really was the biggest thing for me, is when I did start getting into that session, I realized that my brain chatter was causing interference. Those expectations kept on coming back in because I was looking for some kind of measurement that I was in fact hypnotized. But the problem is I had nothing to actually compare it to. All I had is some pre-imagined thing that I thought I would just know or have. And it didn't work like that for me. It was more of a transition. Something I didn't think about, though, is something you mentioned earlier, Dr. Scott, is you said that you know when somebody's hypnotized or not. I would love to know your experience with that for me when we get into my session, because I I didn't really know I was hypnotized until I listened to the recording, if that makes sense, because I realized how much I didn't remember. And the things I did remember, I've noticed, were things that you intentionally asked me to do, like draw that picture. I remember the tree very clearly, even right now. But there's giant gaps of things I don't remember. And I'm listening to the audio with my wife. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm talking about right there. I have no clue. So, I'm sure a lot of people want to actually get into that. So let's go into real quickly. When I did get to your office, I know we sat down first, and could you bring me a little more into kind of what your typical onboarding session looks like for that, and why those points are important?
All very great points. If anything, you might have fussed too much about it beforehand. So
Yeah.
My humble encouragement is don't worry about fussing about it too much. Just have no expectations. So the part beforehand, we practitioners call the interview, just keeping it simple. And our interview, I think, was close to 2.5 hours.
I'm a talker.
Which is fine. And this brings me to another quick point I want to take before I come back to this is, again, when it comes to having no expectations, I always tell my clients to make sure you have time, right? You don't want to expect a minimum 4-hour appointments and then have to go get your hair cut. I make a joke because I don't have any,
huge.
But you don't want to have a list of errands to go do. Yeah. Clear your day. Okay. After your session, when your session starts, clear your calendar, especially if it's in the late afternoon or evening. Just clear it. Okay. Do yourself the grace. You're going under hypnosis. Clear your schedule. The interview is necessary because it helps you. And even in your interview, if you remember, you were talking about everything, and then I'd bring you back to certain points, and then I'd say, let's go back to even childhood days, right? There's pattern recognition just in your beta brainwave state, talking about everything that's happened to you since you were a toddler. And that's the same with everyone. You said many times during the interview, that didn't become apparent to me until I'm just sitting here talking about it. And no one really, unfortunately, ever gives themselves that chance. When's the last time someone said, hey, can you just tell me about everything since you were born? No one ever walks around saying that. So,
and I want to tell it all the time because I'm a talker. And so, yeah. And what's really fascinating that you just mentioned there with that is, it was almost a pre-hypnotic session. Now that you mentioned that, I mentioned that I'm really good at pattern recognition, and I realized that yes, you were already speaking in a slightly hypnotic way, saying, let's bring our attention back to this, which is kind of the formula for active hypnosis, I guess. This would be a form of pre-hypnosis. That's fascinating because that's why I feel like I went in pretty easy and I had no idea. That's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I knew you weren't going to have a problem anyway from when you walked inside, but
I try to stay pretty open to whatever is going to happen. And sometimes that works well. Sometimes my wife thinks that the world is on fire and I'm laughing about it. So
that's funny. All right. So from the interview, it takes as long as it takes. If your interview would have taken 4 hours, fine. I clear my schedule, right? That's fine. Oh, my cat just turned on my little Roomba D-bot here. Give me 1 second. Okay. He likes to toy with the little bot. Anyway. So during the interview, I'm looking for things that I think might subconsciously come out as themes during the hypnosis session itself. And I normally don't have to look too hard because, if I just tell me everything, and then I kind of circle in and I zero in on certain things. And then I say, oh, tell me about the next thing. How did you feel about X, Y, or Z? What was this like? What was that like? You are starting to recognize the patterns yourself. And I might work in a subliminal suggestion every now and then, but it's only to help you go even deeper into the interview process. And while you and I are doing that and we are having your exchange, your subconscious mind already knows that you're planning to have a session. It already knows because from its perspective, past, present, and future happen at the same time. And so it's
Right.
going through your Rolodex of past lives. It's going through your whole catalog and it's saying, do I show him the one where, he was, I don't know, a chef for the emperor in Japan? No, not that one. Not today. Do I show him the one? Do I show X? Do I show Y? Do I show Z? It's picking out the best thing that you need to see and understand in that particular moment, in that particular day, which again points back to why you don't have any expectations. It's not up to you. It's not up to me. It's up to your higher self. And so we do a
Right.
thorough interview so that all the information is laid bare. And so that your
Right.
subconscious can then, as if it wasn't already well equipped enough to make a good decision anyway, it could be like, well, on this day, he needs to hear X, Y, or Z, or
Right.
recall X, Y, and Z. And so it'll pick an appropriate life or lives for us to see.
Right. I will tell you, I think, and it's kind of my last like little tip on something that I think, and I saved this one for last because this was the most fundamental switch for me. I might have had a slight unfair advantage just because most of my time not working is spent on exploration of consciousness from a scientific, measurable standpoint, being that psychospiritualist brand of trying to understand spirit through science and merge these seemingly conflicting principles are actually, different sides of the same coin. So my biggest, I would say, resource that I had going into it that I really leaned on is understanding what these layers of consciousness are and some recognition of how to understand them as they pertain. And the reason why this was a big deal for me is obviously, and this is my understanding, I know there's a lot of people use basic same terms, but for me, the subconscious being that inner child that runs your routines and is and usually speaks through. Runs your routines, your behaviors, and kind of speaks and feeds on the emotional side of things. Your active consciousness being the participatory one that we're experiencing now, where I typically see a little bit of variance in at least my understanding of it is the role of the superconscious or universal consciousness. Again, like all things, and it's all a spectrum. There are no actual definitive layers. There's a spectrum of them, but when I came into this, how I approached it is that I would be speaking to either my subconscious or my superconscious or both. And the interchangeable part that I hear is what that superconscious is. For me, at least how I approached it and my understanding of it is universal consciousness to me is the all, the God, the universe. It's the all things. It's universal consciousness. To me, my super consciousness is a layer within that. It's my super soul, not necessarily the layer that we all are, but I do understand, especially in QHHT, the understanding is that super soul, that super consciousness is also that universal soul. But either way, not relevant to this, but knowing when I went into it that whether you do or don't believe in spirit, because that's difficult when you're trying to understand hypnosis, which is a very like physical, earthly thing, a thing you feel in your mind, your brain, and your body. Understanding that if you can't grasp the concept of speaking to a spirit or a soul because you're already trying to understand something like hypnosis that you may have never experienced before, understand that your consciousness, that other than your active, it's always talking to you, always. Just always. It's always speaking to you. I say that my super consciousness likes to talk to me through synchronicity, that it's one of its favorite ways to talk. It drops the number 42 anytime there's something of note. Like, I know how to talk to that. My subconscious, on the other hand, is the one that we all hear from all the time, but we don't ever really listen to because we think it's kind of our self. And so when I went in, I assumed that whatever I was going to hear, it's going to feel it's like it's just me talking to me, like I'm talking to myself, right? Because in a way I was, but what I was doing, and Dr. Scott, you put this so perfectly for me, is that I had to go in and pretend like I was almost like a reporter, that if I empty my brain, thoughts, images, we don't know what form it's going to take, but it is going to appear in some measurable form. In my case, it was felt a lot like intuition. I didn't get a whole lot of visuals, but you did help me create visuals by saying, can you describe this? And so if you guys go in there and you feel like it's just you talking to yourself, it is. But it's an aspect of yourself that you overly identify. So you don't realize that it is a different fraction of yourself that's communicating. And I didn't really even understand that, Doc, until afterwards when I listened to the recording, and I didn't remember half the stuff, more than half the stuff I said, I don't remember. But during it, I was consciously aware because you were asking me questions and I was reading off, for lack of a better word, what that information was. So my biggest tip on side of, letting go of your expectations, that includes whatever comes to you. Don't judge it or label it as, is this real? Is this not? Just repeat back what it is that you're experiencing, because there is going to be a pretty profound message in that. Even if you don't believe it was some higher spirit, there's still something your subconscious is trying to communicate with you. And if you already feel like you know what that is, that's because your superconscious has already been trying to get you to understand it. And then someone like Dr. Scott will come along and draw your awareness to that message and then help you elaborate on it. So don't expect it to be some angel or voice of God. Sometimes it sounds just like you because, well, a lot of times the voice we need to hear the most is our own. So that's my last tip. Doc, I'm going to let you take it from here and kind of transition into the actual session and kind of give me any of your insights. And guys, I want to let you know, I haven't actually talked to Dr. Scott about my session at all. So this will be my first time really having that discussion. So,
oh man, how to follow that? Yes. Everything you said, spot on. If I could boil it down, I like to use the diver metaphor. Or the Matrix metaphor. I mean, it is Matrix hypnosis.
It's my favorite.
Yeah.
And relevant to my session, strangely enough.
Yeah. Yeah. You noticed that, huh?
Yeah.
So,
well, the Photoshop picture of my face kind of helped nail that home. So
my very poorly Photoshopped. Maybe some of your audience saw that, the very poorly Photoshopped architect.
It was perfect. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Distraction. I'm ready.
The metaphor of the Matrix works. If you guys recall that movie, and can you believe that was made in 1999? I mean, talk about dating myself. But if you've seen the movie The Matrix, you recall that there's the people that have hacked the Matrix, they're inside running around. That is you, the one who is being hypnotized inside the Matrix, running around. And then me on the outside, I'm sort of your operator. I'm helping you navigate. I'm not in charge. You're in charge. You're deciding to go right or go left, or tell me this or tell me that, or turn over this rock or that rock. I'm just the operator looking for signs, telling you where an exit is, where an entrance is. And so that metaphor works. It is kind of like that, where I'm right beside you and I'm there with you, but you're the one inside, and I'm consciously in my waking mind having you tell me everything you see and everything you experience, just like the operator in the Matrix does. He's having the folks inside tell him what they're seeing, and they're saying, oh, I see an agent here and there, and he'll be like, turn right on Wabash or something like that. It is kind of like that in a way. You, the one who's hypnotized, you are reliving scenes from a past life, a past existence. Although in your case, I'm not so sure the word past matters. But for the rest of your audience, normally in a normal session, and JD, I'll say yours wasn't exactly normal.
Say it's abnormal. Say it's abnormal. I hear that a lot more than one would expect.
In a normal session, you will go visit scenes from a past life, and we move you forward to certain important times in that past life. I, as the operator, I help move you forward and navigate and explore those things. I can pause things and have you stop and recollect and turn around and say, okay, I know you're focused on X right in front of you, but let's pause that scene, turn around, look around and see what's behind you, so you can consciously remember things in the moment. That's normally how this goes. And, for example, a typical, if I can use the word typical, and I'm seeing less and less typical sessions. I'm not quite sure what that means in the broader sense, but typically Dolores Cannon referred to these as digging for potatoes lives. They are lives where, you know, they're not super interesting. You know, no one's going to be writing a book about them. You're in a garden and you're literally digging the ground for potatoes, or just trying to survive, just trying to get by, trying to avoid detection, trying to just raise your kids. And there's lessons in there that that person needs to see or consciously recall. And that, you know, somewhat mundane life, objectively speaking, is incredibly important to the one who is reliving it. And they need to see that, and they'll tear up as they recollect that life, and they'll learn lessons from that. And so we move you forward to a few days in that important life, and then we take you through the death scene, and then we'll even take you through to the spirit side. And the whole time you're floating above it, you're not affected by the death or anything like that. You're talking about it objectively because I'm your operator. It's my job to keep you from that, and I do. And when we're done, you'll have the memories, not just in your conscious mind, but you'll have it on recording, so you can go back and relive that life whenever you need to recall it. So typically we go back to a digging for potatoes live, as Dolores Cannon would say. What's interesting about that, though, is, you know, the question is, how do you know I'm not making it up? Well, why would anyone make up a mundane and boring life? You know, why would anyone do that? You know, it's like, okay, you go through all the steps to get yourself ready for your session, and then bam, there you are, digging for potatoes. You know, if it was a creative writing exercise, you'd probably, you know, weave in different plot points. You wouldn't just suddenly die of the plague, you know?
Right.
So,
yeah. And I would say what's really interesting that something I'm experiencing right now, actually, that I don't know, probably not a whole lot of people experience, is while going into it, I had this doubt of what if it's not real, like what is real anyway type thing, because I did have that doubt. It's there. Even when you're kind of doing it, you're like, am I making this up? Like, because you're talking to yourself, obviously, because when you're in the session, I'm not consciously communicating. I'm also like kind of talking to myself. And I had that. I'm like, what is this? What I've learned with my experience was that like mine, I was just telling you, like you will prompt me, what do you see right here, right now? What is that? And for me at first, it was, I saw nothing because the back of my eyelids, because my eyes are closed. What are you talking about? And you're like, well, just like what do you visualize? And then you just start describing stuff. And then I realized, well, when somebody says, imagine a pink polka dotted elephant, close your eyes and imagine that, you're going to imagine that. But you have to ask yourself, you've never seen one of those before. Where does that come from? Where does that visual of this fictional creature that you've never experienced before, where does that come from? It's your subconscious or some other aspect that can create this narrative to feed you. I think a common misconception is that imagination or ideas are something that we as human beings are consciously doing, when it's more accurate, at least for me, that I'm a container. I'm a conduit. And I think it's all of us. I think we're all this conduit. And these concepts are being fed to us for us to acknowledge and use if we choose to. So even if you're like, where did this come from? Like, you have to ask yourself, did I make this up? Okay, maybe you did, but where did it come from? Like, what gave you that visual for you to have that experience? And that's really what kicked in for me. And I think that's where I felt that original, like, I was like, oh, I see the back of my eyelids. And then I started explaining something. Then I asked myself, I was like, wait, where are these? I'm not making this up. Why would I think about a big white tree? And then next thing I know, like, I was under. I think I wouldn't say under is the right word, but I was in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you had all the tells. You know, rapid eye movements, just to name a few. You had almost like REM sleep. You had rapid eye movements,
right,
very rhythmic, low breathing, you know, and you were referring to yourself as I, right? Which might not seem that weird, but you know, if we do enough past life regressions with you, you might live a past life as a female, right? And referring to yourself as I is a tell to the hypnotist, okay, they're becoming that character under hypnosis. And under QHHT, The thing that's quantum about it is that it is both that life that you're reliving exists both then and now on the quantum
Oh my
level.
God, yes.
And
Yep.
so you are referring to yourself in the first person. It's I. You're not living it as a third party. And so, I had a client who, and she wouldn't mind me telling this, but I had a client who, in a past life, was abducted and sold into slavery multiple times. And which is far more common. I think practitioners come across this pretty commonplace. But she put up a struggle one time. um, and as the hypnotist, she had all the tells. She was definitely on there. But sometimes even their voice will change and it'll take on a different accent, a different dialect. You might have someone
Right.
from New York who's speaking like there's someone from Texas, for example. You had a couple of vocal changes just in your vocal patterns. It wasn't so much dialect change, but the patterning was different. From what I know you to
Right.
be, because I've only known you
Interesting.
a couple of days, but definitely a
Well,
different
you
pattern.
know more about me. I was gonna say you also know more about me than probably anybody at this point because I did in that original opening just fill you in on everything, literally from the time I was born up until present. So I do really trust your thoughts on that because we did spend a lot of very, I would say almost an intimate conversation about some very, very personal things. And when I say personal, I still openly share things, but I did share a lot with you, and I can see that you were actively listening to what I was saying. So it's not surprising that you picked up on what my natural tendencies and mannerisms would be just based on my experience with you.
Thank you. That's very much appreciated. And most QHHT practitioners will be actively listening for those things.
Yeah.
But vocal tells are another way we can tell if you're under. First person, if you're talking in the first person, if your vocal patterning has changed, if you got rapid eye movement, low breathing, there's a bunch of other things. Okay. Um, and then from there, it's just a question of being your operator. You are
Right.
communicating the scene to me. And I think when you arrived on scene, you're describing a crazy sort of crystalline world and sort of a savanna environment, but not earthly at all.
Right.
Stark white trees. I hope you don't mind me saying this, by the way. Stop me if you do.
Well, before we get into that, I do want to get into that because I know that's what a lot of people want to hear about, and I'm relatively open to literally most of the stuff we discussed. I think there was just one little point that I had mentioned earlier, just that we'll pass over. But other than that, I'm really very. My wife will tell you, for better or worse, I'm very open about my experiences. I've learned one of my life journey patterns here is to learn, share, grow. So everything that I experience, I feel like I'm a conduit for that experience so I could share this with other people so it either empowers them to go out and find something that works for them. It does humanity no good to keep things to ourselves, and I that's important to me. So I'm very open on this discussion. But before we get into it, I have one last thing to add that you had mentioned about this eternal now, and this is the last tip that I will give you about going in if you're new to a session or even if you've been before. This is a very good tip to kind of position as a framework for your understanding of reality, and it's actually pretty simple. Time is nonlinear is the first one. The second one is reality is non-local, and I just forgot my last one, didn't I? Yeah. Well, it's sorry. Time is nonlinear. Reality is non-local, and something consciousness is non-local, and reality is non-physical. So let me try that one more time. Sorry, I always say this, and then I literally can't say it right when I want to say it. So time is nonlinear, meaning that all things exist right now, past, present, future. They're all selective and fed into your consciousness. So trust that past lives, future lives, side lives, parallel lives, there is no true linear anything. It's just these all exist as moments, and you can at some point you can embody those and experience it. So go ahead and get rid of that limitation that, oh, how could I have been a dolphin? Because in the quantum universe, all potentials exist. The second one is consciousness is non-local. So while it feels like your superconscious or your subconscious is communicating with you, none of this is actually here, consciousness. It's a projection. So when you are communicating with something else, know that you are that someone else, and that's typical. And then my last one, with it being non-physical, is, and this is really important, is that everything is simply a vibration type thing. Like reality isn't actually physical. So anything configured in the right way in a frequency can manifest physically. There is not an actual limitation into what a quote unquote normal experience would be like. So when you go in, just tell yourself, like, whatever you experience is going to be real to you if you believe it to be true. And so again, if you're like, did I fake that or did I make that up, something like that, for me, it doesn't matter. Even if for whatever reason you that was from your quote unquote imagination, trust that your subconscious has something in that invented situation then that it wants your awareness to. So say you were like, well, I felt like that was silly and it didn't make sense. Well, unpack that. And Dr. Scott will tell you, there's a period afterwards to really unpack things. But again, even after it's done, let go of your expectations. Don't judge yourself or your thoughts on what is that silly. And to wrap that all up, I had mentioned earlier that I'm experiencing something that's a little new. Is while I had that doubt going in, and you get that initial doubt of what is this and what is real, I'm actually coming into this interview with you. I was just like, what if everybody thinks I'm making it up? Like, and that's a real fear I had, because it was silly, like not silly in a bad way, but it was just like, why would I have made that up? Like, that's silly. I was like, everybody's going to think it's fake. Like, it's just so abnormal, So I want to share that, guys. I am consciously doing this, and it is a slight level of discomfort for me. One, because I do want to talk about some of this personal stuff, because to me, the biggest value of QHHT, and I didn't really do this with you, but I think it's how more often it's used, is what a phenomenal resource to uncover and heal like some subconscious trauma that you can get from these sessions. It's next level. So I do want to get into some of that stuff, and maybe some things that you saw with me that, kind of how that plays out. But last thing, guys, let's go into the session. I'll let Doc talk and go from there. Yeah.
Okay. And that's a great segue, because before I get into sort of your past life regression, I realized I made a point just a couple minutes ago about, the client that came to see me, and she had been abducted and sold into slavery. Right. We're in an earthly existence, and this was a very real thing, right? But she didn't come to me obviously complaining about slavery. She came complaining to me about migraines. Okay, debilitating migraines. Maybe some of your audience has these. To the point that the doctors were concerned. Her doctors were concerned for a variety of reasons, because they were that severe and that frequent, and it was really impacting her life. Okay, this is a young woman, and she's had to contend with just these terrible, debilitating migraines for quite some time now. And so she came to see if there were answers about her migraines under hypnosis. And here's what we learned. First of all, with migraines in the conventional sense, in the 3D sense, in 2023, there's a variety of medications and treatments that are often offered to people. And I'm not your medical practitioner. I'm not telling you what to do. Okay. But if you say migraines to a QHHT practitioner, instantly they're thinking something else than what your medical doctor is thinking. And when someone comes to me complaining of migraines, one of the very first things that runs through my mind is head trauma. And so during the interview, I was, asking, did you ever receive head trauma, this or that? And no head trauma, with the exception of when she was born. She had a hemangioma, like right here on her head, on the left-hand side of her head. It had to be surgically removed. It had its own blood supply. It was a whole deal when she was an infant. Okay. I almost put that as a side note. And so we get her under hypnosis. And here comes that side note, right? She's abducted and sold into slavery. And during one of these exchanges, she puts up a fight and receives a knock on the head. We're right here, right where she had the hemangioma. Now, the body remembers. Your body remembers prior existences. And even in mainstream science, through your RNA and through your DNA, you can carry
Right.
forward past traumas. There's so many peer-reviewed
100%.
papers on this now. Like things like phobias, can be passed on. I think arachnophobia was
Genetic.
studied. I think claustrophobia was studied.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for a toddler child who's never been around spiders to be afraid of spiders, right? Or have this debilitating fear of spiders. But in modern science, they've realized that traumas can pass from mother to child, or along paternal lines. So in QHHT, we know that the root cause for a lot of modern ailments actually lies in the past. And that's what was true with this client. She received this knock on the head in that past life, and she has carried forward that trauma into this life, as evidenced by the hemangioma that was born, that was on her head. And so her subconscious confirmed this. And I have a video of this on my website. If you go to matrix-hypnosis.com, you can see it. But under hypnosis, she had this amazing past life where she was just sort of this brave soul going through the trials and tribulations of being sold into slavery and having to lose people, and then being put into a different family, a different situation. And then, so it's a whole thing. But the migraines, the subconscious confirmed, was caused by that life in the past receiving a knock on the head. So doesn't it make sense then that if the root cause of this woman's migraines was in the past, that present day meds aren't going to help, right? That we're not hitting the root cause. And so your body in quantum healing hypnosis technique is a messenger. It carried forward the message from the past of the trauma and the migraines. And in quantum healing hypnosis, once the message has been received, like an unread email, once the message has been received, the symptom is no longer necessary. And so if it's no longer necessary, the headaches are no longer necessary. And this client hasn't had a headache since. So
something really fascinating. Sorry, let me let you finish. I just want to make sure I don't forget something, because something after my session did come up and I wrote it down, and I want to make sure I mention it to you about from my session, something that I have today that I connected with that. So I apologize. Just make sure I don't forget. That's what I'm asking.
Sure. Did you want to get into it now?
No, I just wanted you to make sure. Because that point, what you're saying is actually what I think is the really, in my honest opinion, I think is the most value in QHHT. It is, and again, we didn't really get in any of my kind of healing my trauma type things, but just based on the things that I've gotten since our session that have answered some questions that I've honestly been trying to just logically solve, have kind of just opened up, and the answers kind of just shown up. So for me, I would recommend literally QHHT to anybody. But if you do have some kind of like a phobia or a trauma or any of those things, again, even if you do not believe in any of this stuff, what I will tell you is, like, you take an aspirin when you have a headache. Why not go to a professional who can at least get you to start thinking through the lens of awareness about differently. So while I think a lot of people come into QHHT for these really extraordinary events, and Laura Starr said something earlier about a lot of us had to have these potato farmer kind of lives. What I will say is, never underestimate what you can actually get out of it for the now, because really, I know a lot of people want to see the future or see this alternate life or their past, but the biggest thing that you are going to get out of it is going to be how it helps you operate in the now, in this present you. And if you do have this like trauma or these fears or the stuff that you just can't really bring yourself to deal with, a lot of us call it shadow work, man, QHHT will literally open you up to just a different way to process trauma than I think that we've been allowed to think was possible, if that makes sense. So I did want to make sure you covered some real life healing stuff, because I think when we get into mine, it's less about that, and it's a little bit more of an exploration into more of a philosophical kind of exploration, I guess. So with that being said, I'm going to mention one point, and then I'm going to let you kind of talk about your takeaways from my session, and I can feed in anything that you have for me on that. There's a point in mind where I have I'm just going to say I have broken my ankle in this life, and I have a lot of metal in my right ankle. And as we unpack my story, I didn't even make that connection that there is a part of my story where that is very relevant, that I have something metal on my right ankle. And I did not even make that connection until I'd say yesterday, where I was scratching in my ankle while I was listening to it. And synchronistically, we were right at that part. And I'm like, I have it still. I still have it. So with that being said, guys, I will get into it. I was trying to aim to have this go no later than 9 o'clock, if possible. But I also like QHHT. I don't want to limit this time, because if anybody is finding value in this, if this can help anybody find somebody who can support you in working through your trauma or whatever you're going through, I'm not going to censor us if it helps somebody else find that balance. So Doc, I'm going to let you kind of take it from here on kind of just points of interest, or however you kind of want to approach that. Again, I have very few, limitations on what you want to discuss, but I do want to make sure that, you found it interesting enough that you think it might be able to help somebody, or at least entertain at bare minimum.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And I will add to that, we don't advertise QHHT as, some sort of magic healing, magic cure. That's not what it is. You said it, you hit the nail on the head. It's shadow work. Okay. And
Right.
So what we practitioners learn, we look for in the interview different tells that you're telling us about your body, or different pains or different ailments. QHHT views body pain, body discomfort, body diseases, body sicknesses as sort of unread emails. Okay. If they're on the right-hand side of the body, generally speaking, they're from the present time, the present life. If they're on the left-hand side of the body, generally speaking, they're from the past. And we practitioners are trained how to dive deep on the latter part of those. Okay. And so this isn't some magic cure. There is plenty, I shouldn't say plenty, but several times where someone's pain couldn't be healed because the subconscious said they chose it. This is their burden to carry. They wanted this. And then who am I to even ask about removing that from them? Right. So it's definitely not a magic cure. And I don't want anyone thinking, watching this, that this is some sort of like snake oil. Not at all.
No.
But if there's healing available, if it's not karmic, we can get into that. If it's just an unread message, and an unread message is sent by your subconscious, by who we refer to as they. It's your oversoul. Your oversoul uses your body
Right.
as like an email server to send you messages. At the same time, it uses dreams to send you messages. In fact, it's shouting at you all the time. But sometimes we're so obtuse in listening to the messages that it helps to have a QHHT practitioner help you decode them. And I think in your session, JD, even one time I asked your subconscious, I said, is there anything else you want to say? Is there anything else you want to say to JD while you can talk to him in plain English? Because wouldn't it be nice to just, have your subconscious talk to you in plain English? And I think they might sort of be insulted by that. They'd be like, plain English,
I'm shouting in English. Are you joking?
Yeah. But knowing something consciously in your beta brainwave state is different than knowing something on deeper levels. And so knowing it, one of the values of QHHT is bringing those messages up from the depths up to your beta brainwave state, and even putting it on tape for you, on record for you, so you can play it back in plain English. And so that's how that works.
Yeah. And I would say to kind of summarize what you just said, and I'm a fan. I will say I'm actively trying to redefine that phrase light worker and what that means, because I feel like that got really out of hand and it has so many definitions. And to me, in the most fundamental form, light worker means be the light, do the work. And in a QHHT, what you are doing is you're allowing somebody to be the light for you, to illuminate something in your shadows, and so you can do the work, because you're a light worker. It's okay to have others around you. That's what our spiritual community is for, is to have this community of like and light-minded individuals who can help shine lights and hold ourselves and each other accountable. So like a QHHT practitioner for me, I had no expectations going in, but what you did the best for me is you illuminated some things that were very buried in my subconscious, and you shone a light on that, but you didn't solve anything for me, because that's not what you're there to do. At the end of the day, you can be the light, but I have to do the work. And that's what I'd say going into any session where you really want to like handle something or solve something, you still have to do the work. And that was my biggest takeaway from my session with you is I'm so used to always trying to help other people. It was refreshing to have somebody else kind of shining a light for me and then telling me how I can go home and integrate some of these lessons. So with that being said, you want to just get into it? We should just get into it. Yeah.
Yep. I want to add one last thing to what I said. Then we can get to it. I promise. Doing
sure.
the work is so important. We as practitioners, we are not healing you. We are not healing anything. Okay. We don't have magic powers. Okay. The woman who was fortunate enough to be healed of headaches, she was not healed by me. She was healed by her oversoul, her subconscious, who would only agree to clear that when you're under, it's called clearing. They'll only agree to clear the symptom, the pain, the headache, if we address the root cause and we get the message. And so I think even in your session, right, JD, when we got around to the subconscious part and we were talking about kidneys, it said, no, I was doggedly pursuing the healing, as we practitioners are trained to do.
I heard that on the tape, actually. Yeah, I heard that on the tape. I was like, wow, he's being a little, not you, my subconscious was being a little more assertive about some things that when I heard it, I'm like, you could have just said yes, though. But what that answer was pretty insightful. So.
Yeah. Far be it for me to convince the subconscious to do something against its will. Right. That's impossible. But we do usually ask for the subconscious to at least ease your discomfort. And so
right.
That came out, and it did say, if you do X, Y, and Z, healing will be available to you at that time. But it's sort of 100%. Like, haha, chump, you have work to do. So this baldy ain't.
You talk about it.
This baldy ain't doing it, right? He doesn't have the power.
This baldy needs to do it. This baldy needs to do it. I get it. Yeah, it's saying you talk about doing the work, you need to do the work. My wife is shushing me because, again, I have headphones in. I don't know when I'm yelling. So, all right, guys, everybody who's still here, which seems like pretty much everybody, thank you guys for hanging through that. It was just really important for me to really educate first, because to me that was the most important thing is, yes, I can bring you some really cool stuff, but how can you use it in everyday life to improve on your own life and the people around you? That was really important to me. Doc, I'm going to let you start digging in on you start. I don't even know where to begin, honestly. Even after hearing it 5 times, I still haven't quite integrated all of it or even remembering a lot of it. So I'll let you take over from here, and let's hear what your thoughts are.
Okay. So when you were under, the very first thing that you were telling me, again, being the good diver, the good person navigating the matrix, telling me all the sensory input that you're getting, telling me all of the concepts that are coming into your mind. I knew right away that we weren't on an earthly existence, and QHHT practitioners are used to that. We see not only earthly past lives, but we see lives in the future. We see parallel lives. That are happening in the present, but on a parallel universe. We see extra dimensional lives. And so it can really run the gamut. And JD wasn't making any of this up. I mean, you're not going to have REM tells. You're not going to be referring to yourself in the first person. No one coached him on any of this before he could have got there. And even if they did, I would know. So
Well, also, I would have just burst into tears, which again, I didn't even know I did until I heard the audio. And apparently I cried twice. But again, either way, it was still a very interesting
Yeah.
experience.
So you get on scene and you start talking about um, trees. And so these trees were unique. So picture like a savanna-like environment, but instead of sporadic trees here and there dotting the landscape, these were like stark white, smooth trees. Uh, you described how they sort of came up from the ground, but then they immediately branched out into these beautiful yet sort of artificial looking branches that were big. And so you spent a lot of time describing this one white tree that was in front of you, and you commented how they just dotted the landscape. It wasn't like it was a forested area, but it was a sporadic sort of like someone just like put them there. And you had this feeling of like it was an artificial created environment sort of throughout this first part of the experience. And so I had you walk over and put your hand on the tree, and then you were telling me one of the first things that we look for is, are you in a body? And so a lot of times we humans think, well, if you're walking around, you have to be walking in a humanoid body, only to find out later that you were more of an energy being. That if I asked you to touch the tree, you could manifest a hand if you wanted it, but you didn't need it because you were made of pure energy. And in metaphysics, we find that to be true, especially when you cross over to the other side or you ascend to higher dimensions. You don't take the physical flesh with you, right? And so you could say you're in spirit, you could say you're an energy being. I like the word energy being. And then that was sort of your avatar for the rest of this experience. Let me pause there and make sure everyone's tracking.
Yeah, I will say this is where I have the most recollection. Again, there was that was early on going into it, and so I was just at that point somewhat conscious of what I was being asked for, and I was just describing a visual for me. And then I know at one point you said, "I'm going to ask you to remember this specifically, and then draw this for me later with a pad of paper." And I honestly think that's why this is the most prevalent thing I remember is the white tree and that experience.
Right. We practitioners will do that from time to time, especially if you're describing an artifact of importance, or as you're calling it out, something that I think you were calling out as important. It didn't turn out to be as important later, but it certainly validated
Right.
the planet, the landscape, the dimension, whatever you want to call it, that
Right.
you were in, the container that you were
Right.
in. And so you were sort of this spark of energy. And when I have my clients, I always have them try and do a hop test, where I say, something like, well, put your hand on the tree or manifest a hand, put it on the tree and give me a little hop, right? And describe the sensation. Now, I had one client, where gravity was really intense. Like they could barely manage to stand on their tippy toes, let alone hop, right? And they were perfectly
Right.
healthy, embodied human being. But wherever they were on this in this other situation, the gravity was so intense they couldn't even get off the ground.
Right.
In your case, you were like, if I hop, I don't have to come back down. Like I'm energy. Don't and
Like, what is
yeah.
hopping?
And so you were oftentimes the hypnotist is left behind, the operator, the matrix operator is left behind saying, okay, well, now I get that you're energy, and you probably think I'm slow for not catching on to this point, but now I know. Now I know
Right.
that you have an energy body, and we can address this scenario differently now that I have a good idea of how your avatar works. And so
Right.
from there, we kind of moved around the landscape a little bit, and you saw an obelisk in the distance. And if any of you have read Dolores Cannon's books, and I highly recommend them, there is plenty of regressions in her Convoluted Universe series, highly recommended, where there are obelisks as a theme. Now, normally I thought, okay, great, this is my very first Dolores Cannon obelisk experience. No, that's not what it turned out to be. But I was thinking, okay, this is cool. I kind of know what to expect because I've read the material, I've done the reading. I am educated on this, but again, you took it in a different direction. But I thought upon hearing that, okay, well, we're going to have an obelisk experience. And for those wondering, an obelisk normally is sort of an information drop-off point. And I don't want to get into it.
I didn't know that. I was gonna say I didn't know that, but interesting. Yeah.
It's sort of where you go and deposit information, and the information types it can vary, but obelisks usually symbolize information drop-off points. So I have you move toward the obelisk thinking that's what we're going to do. And then when we get up there, you describe this phenomenon with the veins. Do you want to talk about the veins? And then I'll...
Yeah, this is about the only part I can really give some real context to, because I do recall this again because of the drawing aspect of this, and then I did end up drawing it. To me, what it felt like is that everything was fake where I was at. It's like you had asked me to look up at the stars and tell me about the sky and the stars and this tree and this obelisk and this river. Is that a crystal blue path? And so we're explaining this very surreal, what I could only describe as like a Salvador Dali painting almost ish, but a little more science fiction-y. So for me, the obelisk looked like a white stone, and it was shoved into what looked like a sand ground, but the sand was white and there was no actual sand. It was just looks like the texture and color of it. And this obelisk was shoved down into it. And it's like almost, while the ground looked fake. Yeah, that's the picture right there. And by the way, that's oddly phallic for the record. And I just noticed that afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and point that out. But the veins were, it's like it cracked the ground and created these veins in the ground as if it was like it injured the ground somehow. Later, I started to realize what I felt like is the whole thing was fake, and it was like a spaceship that, and I'm trying to recall it now, my understanding listening to the audio, and what came back to me is it's like I was on some kind of ship, but it didn't look like a spaceship. It looked like I was on, like, I think you would later say, like kind of like a holodeck type thing, where I had constructed this simulated room through which to kind of sit in or be in while we were traveling wherever we were traveling. That obelisk for me, and like you said, it became a little less important later because I don't necessarily know the relevance of it, but I do know that did draw my attention to the fact that I felt like I was on some kind of simulated holodeck that was vibrating. And you had asked me.
Tara said, did you read hers?
No. Save point.
Oh,
Tara.
Obelisks are like a save point.
Yeah, so Tara just mentioned that it's like a save point or whatever, and you had mentioned for information. That would make sense that in my understanding that I was on this ship, I was traveling somewhere, I was an energy creature being on this ship. Wherever we were traveling would take like a really long, quote unquote, time. And so to keep myself from being, I guess, bored or whatever, I had constructed this like weird desert with these white trees and this really blue river. And I think my verbiage when I heard the audio was that it looks like an alien was trying to make what it thought a human is used to, like, oh, it's like, oh, it likes water and trees, and I think there's sand, and so it's just putting these things here, but it has no real context for it. And that was, I know, my first part of the experience. And then again with the audio, I know this goes to like maybe one or two other locations, and at first this seemed completely unrelated. I know to this other where you regressed me to afterwards, but yeah, the tree thing for me, and on my tape, I remember saying, I remember hearing saying it, and I still say it. This seemed like the more boring part of this regression, because I was like, I just feel really bored. Like everything is, there's nobody here. It's just me, and I feel like I've been here for a million years, and everything's fake and stupid, and things like that. So yeah, that's what I recall about that first, what I'd say, section of that.
And therein lies the contrast, because, you describe being this otherworldly energy being in this constructed environment on some crystalline planet or construct or something made to look like a crystalline construct. And there's a weird obelisk with veins pulsing in and out of it and going into the ground. And you're bored. And I'm like sitting here thinking, this is incredible. But, like if you were making it up, why, where's the TIE fighters and the lightsabers, right? Like, why would you manifest the feeling of boredom, right?
Right. I've never seen an obelisk with veins. And I have no idea why that would be relevant. And I hope that one day that'll make sense. But again, yeah, it's interesting.
And so you get up to the obelisk and you realize it is not, in fact, an obelisk. At this point, your awareness started to expand a little bit. I think you might hear it. By the way, I've been transcribing and I do this often. I transcribe my client sessions in a searchable document just to make them retrievable. I think that adds value.
Really smart idea. Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't long after this that you sort of wonder why you're there. And so the hypnotist might have an inkling as to why you're there, or they might not. You might be like, yeah, why are you here? And so I start asking questions, is there anybody else? And you said, finally, yes, I feel like I'm waiting, and I have been waiting. You're waiting for some other being. And so it was this waiting thing. You got the impression that you had been waiting a long time, but yes, you were indeed waiting for someone. You want to describe that?
I don't have a lot of recollection into that. Mine drops off right around the obelisk. You had me go towards the obelisk, and I remember you asked me to touch it, and then I don't really have much recollection. And for whatever reason, even though I've heard it several times, I still can't necessarily recall even what I heard from the recording as clearly as I can with the up to the point where I touched this giant white obelisk thingy.
Yeah.
So I wish I could, but I don't know much about what happened there, but minus a point when we get to that circle room, and that's where I pick up a couple points after that, and then the rest also is a little fuzzy.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I apologize.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're not. It's again, I expected to remember all of it clearly because I was like, oh, I'm completely here and conscious in it. But I realistically, I have a lot of fuzzy points. The next part I pick up, honestly, let's see, from the recording, I knew I was waiting for somebody, and on my recording, I kept on saying I was in trouble for something. And then I think it was like, that's not the proper verbiage. I wasn't necessarily in trouble. It was more of, I had a disagreement with somebody or a group of people over something. And
yes, and we'll get there.
That's
absolutely.
Yeah. See, like I said, it's all very, like, time usually is very timey-wimey and wibbly-wobbly for me. It's doubly so under hypnosis, apparently, because I don't really have an order for this. Because to me, when I try to think of it, it all just was there in a lump. It wasn't necessarily any kind of progression to it for me.
Understood. Understood. And you did great, and you're doing great now. I can't really expect you to recall everything. I think I recall it to a greater detail, not only because I heard you say it, but I've been listening to it and transcribing it. So it's like,
and transcribing
right,
it, yeah.
Right here. There are certain times I have the client sink into themselves and focus on, discerning the nature of their environment and why they're here. And when I said this to you, you really did. You physically like sunk into yourself, your shoulders slumped, and you really sunk into it. And then I think that's probably when you're describing, I don't remember much after that, because you sunk into yourself, and man, we were off to the races.
I was gone at that point. I was gone at that point.
It was almost like a port key in Harry Potter. Like, you didn't know where you were going, but what an adventure.
Right. So I have a question for you real quick before we really dig into this. So I know I wanted to stop at 9. We still have quite a few people on here. Guys, if you want us to kind of keep on going a little bit deeper, we will get a little more streamlined in kind of covering these, because I really want to get to answering some questions. But if you guys want us to keep on going, just give me a thumbs up. If not, we're going to go through a little bit more of kind of the higher points of kind of your big takeaways from it. From that, and then answer some questions. So I just wanted to kind of, my wife is, again, the timekeeper, wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey for me over here. Time doesn't work for me. So I just want to give everybody a heads up that we know that there's still people watching, and I don't want to cut anybody short. So let's just keep on going. Okay, cool. We got a thumbs up. Good. All right, let's go ahead, Doc. Sorry.
Along that same point, honestly, there's so much material in this one regression. If you wanted to do, if you're,
We might have to do a second part. You want to do a second
Yeah,
part?
if
You
your
guys, you
viewing
guys think we
audience
should do
wants
a
it,
second part?
I'm happy to come back and talk whenever.
Yeah, and then that way we can really dig into a little more depth, and then I will literally listen to it again right before we go on. But for now, let's go a little bit longer on. Actually, let's do questions. Let's do questions for anybody, since we really covered in depth what QHHT is and kind of the benefits, and then we can get into more of my experience later. Because again, for me, the priority is making sure we educate and inform the people who are here on kind of why it was important, at least, and how they can apply it. So you actually went through the chat where I had posted some questions. Do you want to pull those up and let's go through a few of those questions?
Okay, someone asked, just generally, what are the benefits of having a session, and how do you evaluate who is a professional or well-skilled at this? Well, I kind of already said, but I'll say it again. If you go to QHHTofficial.com, there is a button called Find a Practitioner. Okay, now you can type in your location information and you'll be returned all the practitioners in your area. Now there's different levels of practitioners. Okay, someone could be listed as an intern, someone could be listed as level 1, level 2, level 3. Okay, and these are just relating to how many sessions these people have had to give you an idea of their experience. I myself am a level 1, which is sort of a baby in the QHHT world, but I have finished my internship, and so now I've progressed to level 1. I'm looking at level 2 here pretty soon. So this is to give you an idea. When you see levels on there, that's all it is. Like a level 3 will have done so many sessions, and so level 2, level 1. But if you're looking down, if you're looking in your area and all you see are interns, utilize them. Utilize those interns, because they're trained in the same technique that Dolores Cannon used during her 40+ year career. So use those interns. They are looking for sessions. They will not charge you a dime. So, something that happens is people are like, well, how much does it cost? This and that. First of all, you should value the money you spend. Because if I told you, oh, it's $25, well, you'd view it as a $25 investment. Well, then how are you going to have, if you put a $25 worth of energy into it, is it really going to be super worth your time? I don't know. But believe me, these interns who aren't going to charge you anything, they're hungry and they want to listen to you and they want to help you and they want to write about the experience in their notes and learn from it. And so if you are just looking to have a session, I encourage you to look up those interns in your area. And not only do they need the experience, but if you're in a position where you could use the savings like that, that's my humble tip. Look up an intern.
Yeah, absolutely.
Level 1, 2, and 3 would probably charge progressively more. And so that's just how that works. So as you're looking on the Find a Practitioner page, there you go. So how do you evaluate who is professional? I just answered that. QHHTofficial.com. Right. It's not just, go to Facebook and type in QHHT. Maybe you'll find someone there. I don't know. But if you want the end all be all to see,
go direct to the source.
Go to the source.
Yeah. 100%.
How does Dr. Scott know which past life to go into? Is it random? Do spirit guides help? Okay, no, it's not random. And I don't pick the past life, nor will your practitioner. Sometimes people come to us and they're like, oh, I'm convinced I was Cleopatra or King Solomon. Can we go back to that time? Generally, the answer is no, because we don't pick the session. It is your subconscious that picks the session. And so while you might have been Napoleon or Cleopatra or someone super awesome or JFK, your subconscious wants you to remember digging potatoes. And there's a reason. And you should embrace that reason and have no expectations. So that's my answer about that. How can you be sure the imagination isn't making it up? This is probably the most common thing that we run into. The short answer is nobody is that creative. How about this? I dare you to try. And if you're not laughed out of the QHHT practitioner studio, then,
Yeah, I would add on to that one to me because imagination is something that I think is also getting I think it's extremely misunderstood as a tool and a resource for cognitive function. We oftentimes just allocate imagination to something of like kids do that or children to do that, and obviously, yeah, we inspire our kids to imagine things. We tell them to be imaginative. And to me, imagination is just a label that we give to a type of function and procedure that your consciousness has at its disposal to communicate. It goes back to that elephant. If I tell you to close your eyes and imagine a purple elephant with pink spots, is that your imagination? Cool, let's call it your imagination. But what fabricated that visual that you've never experienced before? And when I say that, my superconscious loves to communicate through synchronicity, my subconscious loves to talk through imagination. And when I stop labeling it as, oh, it's quote unquote just my imagination, and instead label it as I'm being provided some kind of communication from a deeper aspect of myself, and trust that there is something of value regardless of the messenger or where it came from, you start kind of looking at imagination differently and saying, what if imagination is your superconscious talking to your subconscious and your subconscious tossing it to you? And then you're like, okay, well, what's it trying to say? What am I trying to say? So even if it is imagination, labels are very subjective terms. Who cares? Like, where is the message in that? Whatever it is, wherever it came from, there's something of value for you there if you're willing to let go of this judgment of yourself of feeling silly. Like, shit, I'm going on to Facebook Live to talk about mine, like I've let go of that judgment because I care more of what's the message in it. And that's what I'll tell you. If it feels like your imagination, cool, still write it down. What is a dream? Write it down. Like, there's a message in everything if you're willing to look for it, find it, and most importantly, do something with that information. So that's what I would say about the imagination aspect, and that's an important one for me.
Well said. I would add to that. We practitioners, we know all the tells. We know when someone is under and when they're not, for the most part. And with increasing experience, like you would never be able to snow a level 3 or level 2 or maybe even a level 1. And I doubt you could snow an intern, if they paid attention. Right. So there is, however, that being said, we do work with the visualization part of the brain. So when you're reading books and you're forming the pictures in your mind as you're reading, or you're listening to a podcast, a murder mystery podcast that are so popular, and you're forming the pictures in your mind as you're hearing, we're working with the part of your brain that is visualizing. With that's where memories and past life consciousnesses are stored. That's where that's in your pineal gland. That's your antenna to the Akashic record. And so you are accessing the part of your mind that has the pictures and the memories, and and we work with that. Okay, that's what brings the past life memories to you. So if I tell you, hey, see a green tree, all of you listening just saw a green tree. Those of you who are more visually attuned probably saw something more than just a static green tree. You probably saw a green tree with lots of leaves. You probably saw wind flowing through the leaves. You probably maybe saw a bird perching on it. I don't know. But we do work with the visualization part of the brain. So there's that.
Right. Before we go into another question, what I want to do is we're going to start wrapping up here, and then I'll get with you and we'll schedule the second one. I did want to share something extremely interesting that came from the recording, and I had promised everybody that I would. While we were listening to my recording, because, you'd asked me to listen to it multiple times, and while I was listening to it, we had picked up a part where it sounded like somebody had said something, but it didn't sound like me or you. And this is completely unexpected. I didn't come into this with any kind of like paranormal lens on this, but I ended up getting a little bit of a slightly paranormal experience for this, and I just want to share with everybody. I tested out trying to play this so people could hear it, and with a couple friends like through this, and I've noticed that they couldn't hear it. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to post a link to download the little audio clip of this for other people to listen to it. So we heard somebody talk, we thought, and at first we thought it was just me exhaling, or maybe I mumbled or something. And then I realized, I was like, well, I've listened to the rest of the audio. what happened was a whisper, and it sounded like a whisper right directly into the microphone. And I don't know where the microphone was at, but I do know it wasn't near my face. It was nearby. And if I would have whispered, it wouldn't have picked up a whisper, because I remember you telling me afterwards, you had said you had gotten really low and I could barely hear you, but like this was a whisper and it was loud, like it was like right up on it. And then we found a second, a lot more subtle one right below that, that's towards the end. And we couldn't tell what it is. We listened to it like a lot. So I posted on my Facebook page, and a great friend of ours, brilliant friend of ours who's a really good audio technician, took it and cleaned it up for us, like cleaned it up, and even provided a visual depiction of that thing, because my question, I assumed from the very beginning it was me exhaling. I assumed it was because it sounded like a breath. And I had asked him, I said, hey, is this a whisper? And he showed me on the visual, a breath would have this like that, and it doesn't have any in and out. It's a pop like that. And then the second one was also, but it was still relatively slightly inaudible. So our friend Tara, and you'll see her in the chat, and a lot of you guys know her, but if you don't, she's in the chat right now. Like, check her out and follow her, and also obviously Dr. Scott, follow Matrix Hypnosis. But she actually asked if I could send it to her, because she does audio work as well, and also she is really experienced in EVPs, which is like, a lot of people have noticed, don't know what that is, but it's like these electronic voice phenomena. It's something that seems not physical in the room, and she's also a medium, so she does have this grander view from a spiritual standpoint as well. So I sent it to her, and she cleaned it up through her own software, and isolated some of the points. And I will tell you what I wrote down, what I thought it sounded like the word said. My wife wrote it down, and then we had a couple other people kind of tell us what they thought they heard, and we compared notes, and we got relatively the same thing on the second one. The first one isn't very clear. So Tara, and I'm going to share this too. I got to figure out a way to post her videos too, because what she did is she even did a medium analysis for me of it. So she played the audio, she slowed it down, and then played it over and over, and then she spoke with her spirit guides and got some confirmation. The first one, like I said, I'll put both of them up there. The second one was the most interesting because that's the most audible. And I'll tell you what.
See, I think the first
You think the first one's the most audible? So the first one sounds like either amen or amen, like prayer, or amen, like an amen raw sound. Tara's on it was, it sounded like an And the reason why the was interesting from her point of view, and how she explained it, is you hear like a breath, and then all of a sudden, a split second later, I go, like it's almost like it's an and then I reflect that But what I found really interesting is I'm talking, and then I stop for a second, and then you hear this almost disembodied whisper, like I listen to it, and then I start talking again, then I stop again, and then you hear the second one. And to me, the second one's the most interesting because it sounds clearly like it says help or help me. You can almost hear a me at the end. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link on here, and anybody can listen to it. I can't say definitive anything, what it might actually say. Tara's takeaway is that it was definitely two different entities. And if you hear them, they're like, that's not a tone that I would make or could make, especially in a whisper. And so I want to share those and let people get some feedback of what they think that they hear on that. But that was just an unexpected experience that I've had through this again. And before we got on this call, you asked me, what kind of changes have I felt or experienced? And I actually have since then been having some visual things happening. Like I see some movement things here and there, but I want to leave it at that. And hopefully hopefully nobody's disappointed with this, because for me, this was an absolutely extraordinary experience. More so, I'm very flattered that I get to introduce you to my humble little community, because what you've done for me is really given me an experience that I've really been looking forward to having, and I relegated to one day, and I actually got to get it sooner than I expected. So what we're going to do, guys, is, again, it's late here. Enjoy the recording. I'm going to get with Dr. Scott and we're going to plan a second one. And I promise the second one, we will just talk about my actual session and some finer points on that. If Doc, if you're cool with that.
100%. And thank you for having me,
Cool.
JD.
Awesome.
Appreciate everybody.
So I appreciate it. Yeah. I will keep everybody updated when we do that. I have a range of people who are actually in Australia, so I'm trying to do a little bit later ones so I can get the most people who are wanting to watch this. So I will get with you soon. Everybody else, I will let you guys know what we end up doing. I just want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody literally who kind of help contribute to this through the audio work and that. We'll talk to you guys soon. I appreciate you guys. I love you and good night. Yeah. Cool. All right, Dr. Scott, have a good night.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.